What if the apocalypse had already been prophesied, centuries before John ever wrote his book? What if Isaiah's visions weren't only about the past, but about the end of all things? What if hidden inside dusty scrolls and forgotten parchments of the Old Testament lay a secret map, revealing the judgment, the Messiah, the cross, the silence, and even the new heavens and new earth, long before Patmos ever existed? Today, I want to take you with me to a time when the temple still trembled with visible glory, when a young priest, marked by religious routine, was pulled out of his comfort and thrown into visions so deep, so spiritual, that even angels covered themselves before what he saw. Isaiah wasn't just a prophet of lamentations, he was the silent herald of the apocalypse. The man who saw the Messiah before Mary ever conceived, who described the cross before the Roman Empire even invented crucifixion, who announced the new heavens and the new earth, while still walking among the ashes of a ruined Jerusalem. And what chills me is realizing that Isaiah wasn't speaking only to kings, priests, or the nation of Israel. He was speaking to future generations. He was speaking to us. Every word that left his mouth carried layers of revelation that only now, in our time, we're beginning to understand. Because what he saw is exactly what we're starting to live. Isaiah didn't write poetry. He wrote a warning. He didn't sing about cheap hope. He cried out for costly redemption. And maybe you've never heard his prophecy the way you should have, because this message isn't for the distracted, it's for the awakened, those who still feel that heaven is speaking, but in codes only the remnant can decipher. It was the year King Uzziah died. The nation of Judah was in mourning, but the temple still stood. The religious ceremonies hadn't stopped. The Levites still sang their songs. The priests still offered their incense. But something had shifted in the unseen realm, and almost no one noticed. It was in that moment that I saw Isaiah, a young man, raised in the priestly traditions, familiar with the sacred halls, accustomed to the smoke, the chants, the rituals. But that day, everything changed. Because that day, he saw. He wasn't ready. None of us would be. Because this wasn't an ordinary vision or a devotional experience. What Isaiah saw tore through the fabric of reality itself. The curtain between the natural and the eternal was ripped open from the inside out, and suddenly the physical temple dissolved before the true throne. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, seated on a high and exalted throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1. The glory didn't come like a gentle mist. It came like a sacred avalanche. The smoke filled the air. The pillars shook. And the seraphim, creatures of fire and worship, flew around the throne with 6 wings, crying out, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of heaven's armies. The whole earth is filled with his glory." Isaiah came to his senses, and when he did, he fell into ruin. "Woe to me!" he cried. "I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of heaven's armies." Isaiah chapter 6, verse 5. This is the part that makes me tremble, because Isaiah wasn't in a brothel. He was in the temple. He wasn't in rebellion. He was serving. Yet even so, he collapsed before holiness. Because when God truly reveals himself, even the righteous tremble. What once seemed like religion is exposed as insufficient. The system collapses. The self dies. In that moment, Isaiah didn't just see glory, he saw judgment, because the throne before him wasn't only a place of worship, it was also a seat of justice, and there, in God's presence, he understood all his purity was dust, all his tradition was a veil, and the entire system around him was blind, mute, and defiled. The problem was never the lack of rituals. It was the lack of brokenness. Routine had replaced repentance, and heaven decided to intervene. Then something glorious happened. One of the seraphim flew to the altar, took a live coal with tongs, and touched the prophet's lips with fire. "See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin is forgiven." Isaiah chapter 6, verse 7. It was in that touch that Isaiah died to the world and was born into eternity, because only after the touch did he hear the voice, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" And then he answered, "Here I am. Send me." But this is where the story stops being about the past and starts echoing into the future, because that vision wasn't just a prophet's calling, it was the beginning of an eschatological journey. Isaiah wasn't merely commissioned, he was summoned to see the end. That glory wasn't a spectacle, it was a spiritual password, an introduction to the book that would cross centuries and culminate in Revelation. And what if it were you? What if, during an ordinary service, God tore the veil of your routine and showed you what's behind the curtain? Could you handle it? Would you fall like Isaiah, or run from the light that exposes what's hidden? In my spirit, I feel this is the question heaven is asking today, because there are many living inside the temple but have never seen the throne, many with hands raised but eyes still blindfolded. And when the true king reveals himself, no title, ministry, or position can remain standing. Only one response remains: "Woe to me, I am lost." And maybe that's what we're missing today. It's no longer about another service. It's the collapse of vanity before the throne. It's the holy smoke that unveils the unseen. It's the end of religiosity and the beginning of revelation. Isaiah was pulled out of the natural to be planted in eternity. And from that moment on, his voice would never sound the same, because whoever has seen the throne can no longer speak lightly, and whoever has heard the voice carries judgment and hope in the same breath. After the glory came the voice, and it wasn't calling specific names. It sent out a summons into the air, like an invisible trumpet that only those alive in spirit could hear. "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. It was an invitation, a risk, a commissioning, and Isaiah, his lips still marked by the fire of the altar, answered without hesitation, "Here I am. Send me." His response was beautiful, yes, but also dangerous, because what God said next would test even the most faithful. "Go and tell this people, keep on hearing but do not understand, keep on seeing but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people calloused, dull their ears and close their eyes." Isaiah chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. The first time I read that, my hands trembled, because Isaiah's calling wasn't to preach and be applauded. It was to speak and be ignored, to proclaim truth and not be understood, to light a torch before a people who would choose to stay in the dark. But why? Why would God send a prophet if he already knew the people wouldn't listen? Why raise a voice if their hearts were already hardened? This is where the human mind collides with divine purpose, because in the kingdom, even silence has meaning. Even rejection fulfills prophecy, and even the hardness of hearts reveals the timing of judgment. Isaiah wasn't called to persuade. He was called to testify, to leave a record, to make it known that God had spoken, that heaven had warned, that the light had shone even when no one wanted to see it. In my soul, I feel there is a spiritual thread between Isaiah and John. Both saw the throne. Both received revelations that went beyond their generation. Both wrote about the Lamb, about judgment, about the heavens and the earth. But there is one crucial difference. Isaiah saw before the cross. John saw after the resurrection, and yet both spoke to a deaf people. The calling never changed, because the human heart still resists the truth. Isaiah then asks, "How long, Lord?" And God answers, "Until the cities lie in ruins without inhabitants, until the houses are deserted and the fields are laid waste." Isaiah chapter 6, verse 11. The prophet is being sent to announce the end, to prepare the nation for collapse. to be the last voice before the silence. And still, he goes. He doesn't argue. He doesn't retreat. He doesn't try to negotiate a more comfortable ministry. Because once you've seen the throne, you no longer live for yourself. And here lies the echo of this prophecy for our days. There are still callings like Isaiah's, callings that do not seek popularity, ministries that do not promise applause, voices born to be resistance, not trend. Isaiah didn't found a prophetic school. He didn't create a movement. He wrote and he waited, and centuries later, his words would be quoted by Jesus. They would be read by John. They would be understood by us. Can you feel it? The calling that echoed in the temple still resounds in the spirits of the remnant. And maybe you are one of them. Maybe, like Isaiah, you have felt the glory. You have wept when you heard the voice. You have said, "Here I am." But now you face the silence of those who refuse to listen. And the question returns. Is it worth preaching when no one listens? Is it worth standing firm when the world prefers lies? Is it worth carrying a truth that few are willing to receive? Isaiah's answer confronts us. Yes, it is. Because the calling is not about the people's response, it is about the prophet's faithfulness. And if heaven has commissioned you, then your "Here I am" is already enough. It was in a time of darkness that Isaiah saw a light. The people lived under oppression. The shadows of the Assyrian Empire stretched over Judah. Fear hung in the air like smoke. But it was there, in that dark moment, that the Spirit opened a prophetic window in time. And Isaiah wrote, "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned." Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2. He wasn't describing political relief. He was seeing divine intervention, a rupture in human history. And then he said something impossible, something that still makes me tremble when I read it out loud. "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. Stop. Read it again. Do you realize what is being said here? Isaiah wasn't just predicting a birth. He was naming the incarnation of the eternal, centuries before Joseph heard the angel, before Mary conceived, before the wise men followed a star. Isaiah already saw, he already knew, he already heard the names, and that is not common. No other prophet described the coming of the Messiah with such clarity, with such anticipation. It was as if he had seen the backstage of Christmas long before the manger. As if, for a moment, his eyes had pierced the heavens and witnessed the eternal plan being woven with invisible threads. But what is most astounding is that Isaiah doesn't just describe the arrival of the child. He presents him as king. The government will be on his shoulders. He speaks of dominion, of kingdom, of eternity, of the increase of his government and peace. There will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7. This is not a partial picture. It is a complete portrait from birth to coronation. It is the gospel before the gospel. And here something burns in my spirit. Isaiah was not merely a poetic prophet. He was a spokesman of the future, a herald of a kingdom yet to come, a messenger of a covenant that would one day be sealed in blood. And what he saw could only have been revealed by the one who dwells outside of time, because no man, by his own understanding, could write with such precision about something that would only come to pass 7 centuries later. Now, stop and think with me. How could a man from Jerusalem describe in detail the birth of someone in Bethlehem? How could he see an eternal kingdom when everything around him was chaos and idolatry? The answer lies in a single word: revelation. Isaiah didn't write based on deduction. He wrote because he saw, because he heard, because he received, and that changes everything. In my heart, I feel that this part of the prophecy is a bridge, a link between the testaments, between the old and the new, between prophetic silence and the cry of a baby on a cold night. Isaiah was the first to sing this song, and every word he spoke echoed until eternity touched the earth. Do you realize the weight of that? The gospel didn't begin with the apostles. It was conceived in the Old Testament, and Isaiah was the first to cradle that promise as one who rocks a child not yet born. He saw the light while everyone else was in darkness, and he called that light Mighty God. Today, while so many live surrounded by the darkness of doubt, pain, and spiritual confusion, that same light still shines. It's not a spotlight. It's not an emotional light. It's the light of a promise that crosses centuries and has already been prophesied. And the question is, are you seeing what Isaiah saw? Or are you still walking in the shadows, waiting for a revelation that has already been given? Because the truth is this: the child has already been born, the kingdom has already been announced, and the government is already on the shoulders of the Lamb. Ivray, while you listened, something began to burn inside you. Write in the comments, "The light has reached me." That phrase isn't just a statement, it's a seal, a silent testimony that Isaiah still speaks, and that you've heard. And if this light has touched you, don't let it fade. Subscribe to the channel right now, because there is still much to be revealed. And what comes next will make you see the cross the way Isaiah saw it, before the world was ready for it. There's a part of the book of Isaiah that I can never read without my eyes filling with tears, not because it's poetically beautiful, but because it's brutally true. Isaiah chapter 53 isn't just a prophecy. It's a plunge into the pain of a man who saw what the world wasn't yet ready to understand. He wrote as someone who was there, as someone who witnessed, as someone who heard the nails before they were even forged. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 3. When Isaiah wrote this, crucifixion wasn't even a known practice. There was no Rome, there was no cross. But the prophet already saw a man being crushed. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Verse 4. This isn't a symbolic description. It's a spiritual testimony. Isaiah saw the innocent being treated as guilty, the righteous being struck down as if he were the worst of sinners. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Verse 5. I remember the first time I read that passage, not as a reader, nor as a scholar, but as someone who had felt the weight of their own sin. And when I came across those words, it was as if I was standing before the cross, before the name Jesus was even written. It was as if the Spirit whispered, "Before you understood, Isaiah already wept." He didn't just write, he witnessed, he felt, he carried onto paper the anguish of the Lamb. And perhaps this is the most shocking part of all. Isaiah describes the death of the Messiah before Christmas. He sees the rejection before the ministry even begins. He writes about wounds that hadn't yet been opened. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. Verse 7. And I ask myself, who can see that and remain the same? Who can read that description and still think the Christian faith is light, cultural, or symbolic? Isaiah saw God bleed. He saw a Savior stay silent. He saw heaven quiet before injustice. And that, to me, is the height of mystery. Why did the Father allow it? Why didn't the throne intervene? Why, before the greatest suffering of the righteous one, didn't heaven tear open the skies as it did in the temple? The answer lies in purpose, because Isaiah saw what had to be. The cross wasn't an accident, it was a mission, a choice, and that silence was redemption. In my heart, I feel there are people hearing this and being confronted, because so often we imagine a gospel without pain, a faith without sacrifice, a Christianity that comforts but does not confront. But Isaiah shows us the raw reality of salvation. Someone was crushed so that we could be forgiven, and if that doesn't break you, maybe you still haven't understood the cross. Can you imagine what it is to see crucifixion before it was invented? To write about nails without knowing iron, to speak of wounds that didn't yet exist. Isaiah did, because God showed him. And the question that burns in me is this: why have we seen so little? Maybe it's because our eyes are still more drawn to comfort than to glory, more interested in blessings than in holiness, more fascinated by miracles than surrendered to the Lamb. But today, through Isaiah, the Spirit is tearing that veil. He is reminding us there was blood, there was pain, there was silence, and all of it was for me, for you. Like a lamb before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 7. This phrase has always haunted me, because what Isaiah saw wasn't just suffering, it was a kind of pain that came with no scream, a deafening silence, a silence that wasn't cowardice. It was a choice. It was a plan. The prophet, standing before the vision of the servant, expects heaven to intervene, for angels to appear, for glory to flood the scene. But no, everything remains as it is. The Lamb is being unjustly accused, and heaven says nothing. He is being beaten, and the Father does not interrupt. He is being led away as a criminal, and the voice that created the universe doesn't utter a single word. That silence is what tears Isaiah's soul apart. And the most painful realization is this: it wasn't a failure, it was the plan. The suffering of the righteous one was the path to salvation. The silence of God wasn't abandonment, it was consent, because on that cross, something greater than pain was taking place. It was redemption, it was payment. It was the righteous being treated as a sinner so that sinners could be called righteous. Isaiah doesn't just describe it, he trembles, he goes silent before the silent one. Because when God decides not to respond, even prophets are left speechless. And this is where my soul breaks. Because how many times have we mistaken that silence for absence? How many times have we prayed, cried, pleaded, and when we heard nothing, we thought God had turned his face away? But Isaiah teaches us, silence can be part of the plan. It can be the frame around the greatest act of love in history. Because while the Lamb was being crushed, heaven was at work in the unseen, in the deep, in the eternal. The righteous one didn't open his mouth. He didn't defend himself. He didn't cry out for justice, because he was justice itself. And his silence was the language of sacrifice. It was the Lamb surrendering without resistance, not out of weakness, but out of purpose. And maybe this is speaking to someone right now. You've felt heaven go quiet. You've sought answers, but all you hear is the echo of emptiness. What if that silence is the setting for a greater purpose? What if what feels like absence is, in fact, the deepest form of God's care? Isaiah saw it, and today we are seeing it with him. The Messiah didn't come only to perform miracles. He came to bleed, to be silent, to die. And in that silence, he purchased our reconciliation. There was something hidden between the lines of the scroll, something even angels dared not reveal. After all the suffering, the silence, the injustice, the death described in surgical detail, Isaiah writes a phrase that breaks the flow, that defies logic, that shines like fire among ashes. After the suffering of his soul, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 11. Wait, what do you mean he will see the light of life? Wasn't he crushed, pierced, dead? How can someone bleed and then rise? How can someone die and then see again? Isaiah saw something even the disciples didn't grasp at first. He saw the resurrection, centuries before the tomb was carved, before Mary ran to the garden, before Peter entered the cave. Isaiah already knew the servant would suffer, but he would not remain dead. This turning point is the hidden climax of the prophecy, the moment where tragedy bows before glory, where sacrifice doesn't end in mourning but in victory, where shed blood blossoms into eternal justice. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many. Verse 11. The cross was only the means, life was the goal. And the most powerful part, Isaiah not only sees the resurrection, he sees its purpose. He will see the light and be satisfied, as if the Messiah himself, after everything, looked at the fruit of his pain and said, "It was worth it." As if the Lamb smiled. Can you imagine that? The righteous one, humiliated, crucified, buried, now alive, glorified and justifying. And all of this was already written. The tomb was conquered before it even existed. The plan already included the return. The prophecy had already foreseen the light. This breaks me, because if Isaiah saw the resurrection before any apostle did, it means heaven was never caught off guard. The cross wasn't an improvised ending. It was a declared beginning. The plan didn't start in Bethlehem. It started on the throne. And Isaiah, that prophet of the in-between, that messenger of the hidden lines, that poet of pain, was chosen to see first. And here's what burns in my heart. If Isaiah saw the empty tomb before the cross, why do we, standing on this side of history, still live as if death were the final word? Why do we still allow ourselves to be paralyzed by doubt, by fear, by chaos, if the light has already been promised? Deep down, I believe this vision was left within the scrolls, so that today you could uncover it, because maybe you've been living like someone wounded, like someone buried under trauma, injustice, or silence. But the same God who showed the prophet the resurrection of the righteous one is telling you now, the end has not yet come. You will rise. If this truth is reaching you, if these words are burning inside you, then write right now, "I will see the light after the pain." Write it as a witness, as someone who believes even when heaven is silent, because it was in the silence that salvation was born. And while you're here, leave a like on this video. It helps this message reach those who still cannot see but urgently need to awaken. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel, with fierce anger. Isaiah chapter 13, verse 9. These words weren't spoken in the middle of a battle. They weren't shouted on a battlefield. They were written by Isaiah as one who sees with spiritual eyes something that has not yet happened but has already been decreed. He looks toward Babylon but sees beyond it, because the judgment he announces isn't local. It's cosmic. It's the kind of word that travels through centuries, crosses borders, and resounds in the spirit like thunder. Isaiah is seeing a day unlike any other, a day not marked on human calendars, a day that won't fit inside clocks, a day remembered not for the color of the sky, but for the collapse of the earth. He calls it the day of the Lord, and what he describes feels like an invisible tsunami, a spiritual wave that swallows thrones, shatters pride, tears off masks, and exposes everything built without reverence. He writes, "The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The sun will be darkened as it rises, and the moon will not give its light." Verse 10. This isn't a poetic metaphor, it's an apocalyptic language. Isaiah is describing the cosmic signs that Jesus would mention centuries later. It's as if the heavens, seeing judgment approach, refuse to cooperate, as if even creation itself says, "The time has come." And here my soul trembles, because Isaiah isn't just speaking of a nation that will fall. He's announcing a model of the world that will be shaken. The Babylon he names isn't merely the empire of Nebuchadnezzar. It's the image of the system that rises against God. Babylon is the symbol of arrogance, of luxury without reverence, of corrupted spirituality. And when God decides to act, not even the tallest walls can hold. What strikes me most is that Isaiah prophesied this in days of apparent peace. The economy was thriving, the cities were safe, worship services were ongoing, but he saw invisible cracks. He felt the weight of something the people couldn't yet sense. Because the judgment of God always begins before it manifests first in the spirit, then in history. I will punish the world for its evil, the wicked for their sin. Verse 11. God isn't judging on impulse. He is responding to accumulated corruption, to institutionalized injustice, to normalized idolatry. He is saying, enough. And when he says that, no empire stands. This prophecy isn't locked in the past. It reaches us today, because we live in similar times. Modern kingdoms, technological pride, cultures that celebrate sin and mock holiness, and many, as in those days, think everything is fine, that the world still spins without consequence. But Isaiah had already warned, there will be a day, and it will be real. What burns in me is this: we prepare for Sundays, but what about the day of the Lord? We dress for worship, but what about for judgment? We wait for blessings, but ignore the seals. Isaiah didn't preach prosperity. He announced the fall, not because he was pessimistic, but because he was faithful, and his faithfulness led him to write about spiritual earthquakes that would shake even the pillars of institutional religion. Because when God decides to purify, he begins at the altar. And here's the question that echoes within me. If judgment began today, what would he find in us? What would the light that will darken the sun reveal? Are we truly standing on the rock, or just on the emotion of a system that trembles at the first wind? Isaiah saw, and what he saw hasn't passed. It's still approaching. Not everything would be consumed. Not everyone would be swept away by wrath. Because while Isaiah writes about downfall, about judgment, about collapse, he also sees something that remains, something small, hidden, almost invisible to the natural eye. He writes, "But yet a tenth will remain in it, like the terebinth and oak, whose stump remains when they are cut down, so the holy seed will be its stump." Isaiah chapter 6, verse 13. That image haunts me. A devastated field, trunks cut down, branches burned, but there, a stump, a root, a promise. Isaiah is saying, the remnant won't be beautiful, it won't be large, but it will be alive. And that is enough. While everyone looks at Babylon in ruins, Isaiah looks down at the ground and sees something sprouting, because God never loses everything. He always preserves something, even when it looks like all has fallen apart, even when the temple has been defiled, even when leaders have fallen, even when the people have turned away. Still, there is a seed. There is a tenth. That tenth isn't statistical. It's symbolic, prophetic. It represents those who haven't bowed, those who haven't sold their integrity, those who kept seeking in silence, praying in their rooms, fasting without an audience, those who stayed invisible, yet never inactive. And it's them. God is watching. The remnant Isaiah describes isn't defined by religious garments or public presence. It's marked by spiritual resistance, by purity in the midst of corruption, by faithfulness, even without visible reward. They don't appear in the songs of the multitudes, but they are recorded in heaven. I believe this part of the prophecy is speaking to many right now, because there are people who feel exactly like that, stumps, survivors, those who have already seen the collapse, who have been uprooted from the system, who have lost friends, ministries, structures, yet still stand, maybe wounded, maybe silent, but with roots intact. And this is the good news. God doesn't need a crowd. He needs roots, because the restoration that is coming won't be built upon fallen palaces. It will rise from the faithfulness of the small ones, the ones who resisted, the ones who didn't give up when everything around them shouted, "It's over." Isaiah sees that 10th blossoming, and what burns in me is that he not only sees it, he writes it. He seals in the scroll a truth that many forget: the remnant will not be destroyed. On the contrary, it will be the seed of a new era, because in the kingdom, God begins from the end. He plants in the dust. So if you feel small, isolated, misunderstood, maybe you are part of that 10th. Maybe you are seed. And a seed doesn't have a pretty shape, but it has destiny. Isaiah shows us that even the greatest collapse can't erase the divine plan, because God always preserves, always separates, always seals. And the fire that burns everything never touches what was planted by him. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind. Isaiah chapter 65, verse 17. When I read that sentence for the first time, I froze. Wait, isn't that at the end of the Bible? Isn't that Revelation? No, it's Isaiah. And this is where everything turns. Because after announcing judgment, collapse, and destruction, Isaiah sees something few would dare imagine: the world being remade. He's no longer standing before ruins. Now his eyes behold a new reality, a new beginning, a restoration so radical that even the memory of pain dissolves. The former things will not be remembered, as if time itself were healed, as if the deepest wounds had lost their voice, as if pain itself were disintegrated in the presence of glory. Isaiah describes a scene where crying ceases, where death no longer reigns, where injustice no longer exists, where people build and dwell, plant and harvest, where no one dies before their time, where tears finally come to an end. This isn't utopia, it's promise. And the most astonishing thing is this: it came before John, before the apostle saw the New Jerusalem descending from heaven. Isaiah had already beheld it, already walked through it, already written about what would come after the end. And what does that reveal to us? That the apocalypse didn't begin on Patmos. It began in the scrolls, in the deserts, in the eyes of a prophet who dared to look beyond chaos. Isaiah wasn't merely a herald of tragedy. He was a messenger of the most unshakable hope: there is the final restoration. But here's the detail that moves me deeply. This new creation doesn't come through evolution, nor through human effort, nor through religious systems. It is created by God. He says, "Behold, I create." The same voice that said, "Let there be light" in Genesis is now saying, "Behold, I make all things new," because the God of creation is also the God of recreation. And this promise isn't general. It's directed to his servants, to those who fear him, to those who wept in secret, to those who remained faithful without an audience, to those who waited when everyone else gave up. To them, Isaiah declares, "Be glad and rejoice forever in what I create." Verse 18. It's a joy that cannot be stolen, a peace that cannot be interrupted, a glory that will never end. What amazes me most is Isaiah's courage to write this in a time when Jerusalem still stood, but was already rotting from within, when the people still celebrated feasts, but God had gone silent, when everything seemed religiously alive, but spiritually dead. And even so, he saw beyond it, beyond the end, beyond the ashes. That confronts me, because so many today are trapped by the world's collapse, by the darkness of the times, by the signs of the end, that they forget what comes after. They forget that Revelation doesn't end in destruction. It ends in restoration, in renewal, in new creation. Isaiah saw Eden restored. He saw the gardens renewed. He saw children playing in peace. He saw the wolf and the lamb together. He saw a world where God once again dwells among men, and that vision is for now, because it was given before its time for those who still believe. And I ask you, do you live by what you see or by what was promised? Are you guided by the ruins or by the eternal word that guarantees a new heaven and a new earth? Isaiah is showing you today that the end is not the end. It is the beginning of something that will never again be broken, never again be interrupted, never again be profaned. It's in the final chapter of Isaiah that the revelation completes itself. After seeing glory, judgment, the suffering servant, the restoration, and the new heavens, the prophet writes something that takes our breath away. And all nations will come to Jerusalem to worship the Lord. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 23. Pause for a moment. Read that again. All nations will worship. This is no longer a local prophecy. It's cosmic. It's eschatological. Isaiah is seeing the day when the entire world, not just Israel, will acknowledge the sovereignty of the Most High. Kingdoms will fall, religions will end, ideologies will fade, and only the throne will remain. And before it, multitudes from every tongue, people, and tribe will bow, not out of force, but out of revelation. And here's the lesson that pierces me. The gospel is not the escape from the world, it's the inauguration of a new one. It doesn't end with the cross, it begins there. Isaiah saw that the end was just the doorway, the pain was just the labor, the death was just the seed. Because in God's kingdom, what looks like the end is always a beginning. What moves me most is that Isaiah saw all this centuries before John, before hearing, "Behold, I make all things new," before the New Jerusalem descended. Isaiah had already seen, already known, already bowed before the same throne John would see in Patmos, the same throne, the same Lamb, the same eternal worship. That makes me understand that Revelation isn't something new. It's an echo, a confirmation, a continuation. God had already shown it all, hidden in the scrolls, written on parchment, sealed within the lines of prophecy, and now revealed to the awakened, to those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, to those who still believe that the Word explains time, and time confirms the Word. And the question that consumes me now, as I close this scroll with trembling hands, is simple yet eternal. Which part of the story is yours? Are you living as one who has seen the throne, or as one who still trusts in the kingdoms of men? Do you walk as a remnant, or as a crowd without discernment? Are you waiting for the end with fear, or with expectation? Because Isaiah shows us that the end will be real. Yes, there will be collapse, there will be darkness, there will be downfall, but there will also be glory, there will be a throne, there will be worship, there will be eternity, and that is not fantasy. It's living eschatology. The gospel begins where the world ends. If all of this has burned within you, if the word has pierced the surface and reached something deeper, then like this video right now and subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't sell promises. We reveal what has already been written, what the world ignores. Heaven is still declaring to those who dare to listen. Share this episode with someone who needs to wake up, with someone who, like you, has realized that the war isn't cultural, it's spiritual. And in the comments, write with sincerity, "I want to be faithful until the end." It's not a pretty phrase, it's a covenant. And maybe someone who reads it will find the courage to believe again. If your faith is wounded, if your altar has gone cold, if the sound of God's voice feels distant, take a moment and check out the ebook, How to Approach God. The link is below. These are 8 biblical paths to restore the intimacy the world tried to steal. Because no matter where you fell, there's still a way back to His presence. May the same God who revealed the throne to Isaiah also open your eyes to what is eternal. And when the day of the Lord comes, may you not be among the distracted, but among the remnant, among the faithful, among those who endured until the end, until the next episode, Shadows of Scripture.